Alright, so we're going to be watching The Anatomy of a Headshot by Dark Science.
It was voted for by patrons of Questions for Science. You already know what happens when someone is shot in the head.
Get what you fucking deserve!
They die.
Ooh.
On the surface, yes, a headshot is
Can I
a
show
fatal
that?
wound, but beneath the gory reality, there's a lot that goes on when a bullet
damn.
enters someone's skull. First things first, in terms of firearms, we're talking strictly pistols and rifles, not shotguns, because a shotgun to the head is pretty self-explanatory. Let's start at the firearm, shall we? When a bullet is fired from a pistol or rifle, the bullet travels through a rifled barrel. A rifled barrel has grooves in it that cause the bullet to spin. When this spinning bullet penetrates the skull, its rotating motion flings cranial tissue outward. Tissue then expands to about 12.5 times the diameter of the bullet, but is only this stretched for about 5 to 10 milliseconds and then shrinks back down to normal size. For instance, a .22 caliber bullet produces a wound of 2.7 inches. A .38 caliber bullet creates a 4.4 inch wide wound, and a .45 caliber bullet creates a 5 inch wide wound. Though it's very short, the expanded cavity does a remarkable amount of damage to the skull. This wound creates a vacuum effect, causing air to rush into it, making the cranial cavity expand, causing secondary fracture lines that spread out from the wound. Most fractures occur at soft locations, like the temples and orbital plates behind the eyes. The higher power the firearm, the more secondary fracturing of the skull, especially at more thick and hard locations like the front and back. Speaking of high power, what factor do you think contributes to making a bullet more damaging to the human body? Its length, its velocity, or its weight?
What gives it more damage? Length, velocity, or weight? I'm gonna go with velocity. It has to be velocity. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what gives it more power, just velocity instead of like length. I feel like you have something like very small, but with like still metal, I feel like it can kill you.
The answer is velocity. To
Oh, yeah.
understand why, let's look at this equation for kinetic energy. In this case, the kinetic energy of a bullet is equal to the weight of the bullet times its velocity squared divided by the gravitational acceleration constant
trying to fucking
times
do
2.
math.
This may seem like a lot, especially if you haven't taken physics, but allow me to make this insultingly simple. More kinetic energy equals more ouch. The higher the kinetic energy of a bullet, the more
Yay.
damage it does.
Now I
And
get
we
it.
can prove mathematically how velocity does this. So let's make everything a value of 10. Okay, so the weight is 10, the velocity is 10, and the gravitational constant is also 10. We run the equation and the kinetic energy is 50. Okay, great. When we double the weight of the bullet, the kinetic energy also doubles to 100. Now, if we double the velocity, the kinetic energy does not double, it quadruples. When there's more kinetic energy, there's just overall more damage. We're talking a stronger pressure wave through the skull, more external gases going into the head, more secondary fracturing, and even splitting of the skull itself. This is why rifles are more lethal than pistols, not because of the weight, but because of the velocity of the round. Now, let's look at what happens inside the skull.
Yo, the more I think about it, the more I start looking at how far we've gotten within like making weapons, like a single gun, rifle, sniper, shotgun, whatever it is, in terms of firepower. Because before we used to just get sticks, make them sharp, and then just kind of throw it at them or just stab things with it to go hunting. But now we can literally hunt from like a mile away and still kill like, I don't know, bear, deer, whatever you're hunting from a very good distance without even like getting close to it whatsoever or having to chase it down for 10 miles like we used to have to do back in like prehistoric times. That's besides the point. We have gotten so far that we have made weapons of mass destruction like nukes and stuff like that. Like a whole atomic bomb is something that nobody would have thought about. If you told anybody like 1,000 years ago, they'd be like, oh, okay, that is not possible at all. But now, in this day and era, like that's possible. You can pretty much level an entire city with just an atomic bomb, any city, and then just kill millions of people with just one go within like, I don't know, like 10 minutes that it takes to like drop a atomic bomb or some shit like that.
When the bullet punctures the skull, it creates an entrance wound, about the size of the bullet. If it exits the skull, it creates an exit wound many times larger than the bullet itself. This happens in nearly all mediums a bullet passes through, whether it be plastic, metal, wood, or bone. This is because as the bullet passes through the medium, it creates a shockwave in front of it which widens. Additionally, the bullet may rupture or mushroom, increasing its surface area. As for the interior of the skull, the bullet causes the bone to bevel. The best way I can illustrate this process of beveling is with a piece of Swiss cheese. This side of the cheese is where the bullet enters and is very clean and small. This side is where the bullet exits and is very wide and flared out. This flaring chips pieces of the skull and launches them into the brain, causing more damage. Once in the brain, three things can happen to the bullet. 1, it can slow and stop. If it loses enough of its energy when it pierces the skull, it will stop in its path inside the brain, probably at the other end of the skull. 2, it passes cleanly through, or 3, it ricochets inside the head. Of the 3, the least common is the third, accounting for about 20% of all bullet paths. If the round was fired from a high-powered rifle, it will most likely pass through. If it's fired from a pistol, it will likely stop in the brain or ricochet. Also, interesting fact, most skull ricochets aren't like this, where the bullet bounces off at an angle. Though it does happen, but not frequently. In the majority of ricochets, the bullet follows the round groove of the skull. The skull is actually very strong, and the bullet, having lost so much energy passing through, simply glides along the groove, sometimes sitting just beneath the scalp. Finally, what happens to the brain in this whole ordeal? Well, it's bad. The brain is a solid, inelastic, and incredibly soft organ. Unfortunately, these properties do nothing to reduce the damage the brain receives from a gunshot.
I mean, I don't think it was ever meant to take a bullet shot, so I wouldn't expect it to be hard whatsoever. You know, the bone, of course, but any organ that's not supposed to be hard as fuck.
Such as your intestines, stomach, and bladder receive less damage from gunshots. The energy from the pressure wave is dissipated because the tissue stretches. However, solid inelastic organs like your liver, pancreas, kidneys, heart, and brain receive full damage from the pressure wave because the tissue does not stretch. Finally, the distance the bullet travels from the barrel to the head can also determine how damaged the brain is. If the shot is far enough away, the bullet may actually bounce off the head. It'll still cause a wound similar to getting hit in the head with a baseball bat or a hammer, but again, it won't actually penetrate the skull, but will still do severe damage. Of course, these shots are well over 100 yards away and are from low-powered firearms like a pistol or a .22. Contact shots, on the other hand, where the muzzle of the firearm is placed on the victim's head and then fired, turns the brain into a literal pulp. This happens for 2 reasons. Firstly, the bullet has the highest velocity when it strikes the skull, delivering the most energy possible. Remember this equation? Secondly, the hot expansive gases that are behind the bullet follow it into the wound. These gases then expand in the victim's brain, pulpifying it, as well as causing the skull in some cases to split open. With all this being said, believe it or not, headshots are not 100% fatal. On average, they're 90% fatal given the right circumstances.
So there's a chance that you might get shot in the head and still survive. There's a 1% chance. Also find it crazy that if you're far enough, it will just bounce off your forehead. There's no way that's... I'm guessing it's true, but like, it's also kind of hard to imagine hitting a shot from that far and for the bullet to lose that much momentum that it just bounces off your head. I would feel so lucky, first of all, if it bounced off my head. Like, just thinking about it, I don't know how I would react. I'll probably just start fucking panicking and running, to be honest. That could have been my last seconds alive. I think this video would have looked a lot differently if you did it with like different guns. For example, if you did it with a sniper, the video would have been completely different because a sniper does way more damage. And I don't think if you did it with a sniper, the bullet would have stopped if you're like 100 meters away or 1,000. I don't think it would have bounced off your head if you did it with a sniper, so that would have been a lot different. And also, if you did it with like a submachine gun, your head would probably fucking explode. But yeah, amazing video, loved it.